Sometimes you want to read a little bit of junk food. Recently, I've been reading some books that are a little bit dense or a little bit heavy, and I just want something that I can devour and that is bad. So I looked through my shelf to find a book that I could meticulously take notes on and hatefully rip to shreds. And I found a book from when I was about 14, We Were Liars by E. Lockhart. I have read this book and I know what happens in this book, and that is why I want to reread it, because this book, if you don't know, has genuinely the worst plot twist of all time. I read this probably 10, maybe even 11 years ago, and it was one of the worst things I had ever read at the time. And today I am here to offer you a bad faith, hateful, mean reading of We Were Liars. If you don't know about this awful book, if you don't know about the twist, baby, you are in for a ride. So let's just get right into this. Before the book even starts, it treats its reader like a child. And I would like to say, actually, this is a young adult novel, and it is absolutely not fair for me to judge this as an adult and by the standards I have of adult fiction. But I don't really have any other metrics to judge it, so that is what I'm going to be doing. But I will keep in mind that this is written for kids, for young teenagers. And I did read this the first time as a young teenager, and a lot of my opinions about it now, I'm contrasting against what I thought of it at the time. And I can tell a little bit what I thought of it at the time because 14-year-old me did annotate this. While I do want to make it really clear that I understand that this book was not written for an adult audience, I also feel a lot of very strong and negative emotions about how stupid this book treats the audience that it is intended for, because I have a belief, an inherent belief, that children and young teenagers are a lot smarter than we typically give them credit for, and it irritates me to no end to watch an adult author write a story as if the people reading it are the dumbest people on earth and cannot do anything on their own. That's frustrating, and it's frustrating in this book right from the jump. First, we get a beautiful map, which is needless. I don't think that we need to know exactly where the houses on this island where the book takes place are. I think it's meaningless, and it makes this feel more childlike than it needed to. And in my experience, this childlike tone is not really what young adult readers are looking for. I think that they want to be treated as capable. They are not little kids anymore, and they certainly don't want to feel like little kids. 14 years old, you try to treat a 14-year-old like the child that they are, that is not going to go over well. We have all experienced being 14. You know what it's like. Do you need a silly little map at the start of your book? Like, what is this? The fucking series of unfortunate events? This story is about the Sinclair family, a family that is very wealthy, that owns this private island that the map is of. And there are 3 sisters, each of them have children, and they all spend their summers on this island. It is following one of the grandchildren, Cadence, through some crazy stuff that happens. I'm not going to spoil it for you until we get to the spoilers part. I'm going to do my very best not to emphasize things too much, because if you don't know, I want you to experience the twist as if you were reading this book, but I don't want you to have to read this book because it's really bad. What I was just saying about adult authors totally underestimating the capabilities of their young adult audiences is perfectly exemplified on the page after this map, where we get the Sinclair family tree. This is the most simplistic family tree you have ever seen in your life. It's the grandparents, their 3 children, and then the grandchildren. If you have to include this family tree that is so incredibly simple, I think it's very clear that you have failed to make the relationships between these characters meaningful in the text. I don't think it actually does matter, and I also don't think it's all that clear in the text which cousins are siblings. You know what I mean? It just matters that they're all Cadence's cousins. That's fine, but to add this family tree in, I think it shows a lack of skill in the rest of the book that we are about to get into, because after that, it goes straight to part 1, where we get a little bit of an introduction into this very wealthy family. We know that they have a lot of money, they have a lot of expectations, and they have some secrets that they are keeping to keep up their appearances and to maintain the image that these expectations set. This is all told through very clipped sentences that have no flow or any narrative yet, because it is just pure information and exposition. It starts with just a whole bunch of sentences, line breaks, which I'll get into because E. Lockhart loves herself a fucking line break. It is clear from the start that there's not a huge amount of skill in this writing, and maybe that is the genre, but I don't think it's fair to say that young adult novelists aren't good writers. I just think E. Lockhart isn't a good writer. Chapter 2 is more exposition and more information and more very choppy, clipped, cut up sentences. This is information about our narrator, Cadence. She is 18. She has been in an accident. It's immediately alluding to this accident because it needs to keep you interested. There needs to be something that you are desperate to know, so you keep reading through the bad writing and the bad pacing and the bad narrative of this book. And I will say, 100%, that is an effective way to keep someone reading. That is what I read when I was a kid. I read a lot, and if people ever asked me, what do you like reading? I would say, I just like reading books where when you read the summary, there's something that you want to know. That was my entire taste. It still works for me. It is also true that when that is the only thing keeping you reading, some piece of information that you want, it's often hiding something. And it is hiding a lot of things in this book. A lot of things that, reading it now and as an adult, I am unable to ignore. So Cadence has had some sort of accident that has given her severe debilitating migraines, and it has changed her as a person. She clearly, in this introduction, has some resentment towards the materialism and the wealth of her family. Okay, the way that it says she's changed is by saying, I used to be blonde, but now my hair is black. I don't know why I think that is so funny. That's so classically corny. Like, my family is blonde, but I need to outwardly be the black sheep, so I am dyeing my blonde hair black. Come on. Like, that is her little act of rebellion and quirkiness. So tough. So tough to read. She is impossible to like from the jump. Part of that is because she really has no personality. She just has a few quirks that are masquerading as some sort of characterization. Cadence begins her story a couple of months before the accident because, of course, it can't tell us what happened right away. This is when her dad abandons her family out of the blue for a woman that he's having an affair with, and they have to go to the island alone. There is a part that I like here where she's talking about how he puts his suitcase in the car when he's leaving, and then he pulls out a handgun and shoots her in the chest. And I love that. I love the shocking randomness of that. I love the violent imagery. I think it's a pretty direct metaphor, but I enjoy it nonetheless. And then it quickly ruins itself through E. Lockhart's use of weird descriptive words that I think she sees as poetic or skilled, but actually just kind of fall flat in every way. This is indicative of the rest of this book. I mean, it's really not that big of an issue when I read it to you here, but you will see that it's showing a theme that we are going to come across many times. She says this, and then she talks about this metaphorical blood that's gushing from her, and she says, it tastes like salt and failure. I can't really explain why I hate that so much, but I think it's just corny and stupid. Sorry, that's really cruel, but that is how I feel. It isn't the worst crime in the world, but it did ruin a moment that I think I could have liked. I think was kind of fun. Right from the jump here, we're 4 pages in, it's trying to create a voice for Cadence that is very distinct. And it's doing that using some of the oldest, cheapest tricks in the book. One of which is a lack of contractions. There's also this kind of awkward vocabulary that is meant to convey old money, but it's so over the top that it feels very chopped up, particularly with the lack of contractions and the short sentences and the random line breaks. And it's hard to feel very much warmth towards Cadence because her voice doesn't really sound like a person's voice. And that's really troubling in a book that, in a lot of ways, is meant to be a coming-of-age love story. It's more than that. It's mostly a mystery, a really corny mystery with a really fucking corny plot twist. But there is love here. And that love is almost for her cousin, but not quite. The next information that we get is about her cousins, who are called the Liars. Immediately, I have an issue with this. I'm 80 pages into this reread. I haven't finished this yet. She says that the family calls her and the cousins that are the same age as her the liars because they're always causing trouble. This has not in any way been shown to be true so far. They literally, like, there is actually not really any significant engagement with the adults when they're spending the summers on the island. They are off in their own little world. And sure, sometimes they talk about stealing wine, but there's never any trouble that they get into, even though it says, we've always been trouble. Well, not in any way that it's ever shown me at all. I think it just wanted to call, I think the book just wanted to be called We Were Liars, so it called these kids the liars. I don't think the parents care about them in any way whatsoever. And I think that could have been an interesting thing we could have explored. But no, because of course not. So the two cousins that are Cadence's age are Mirren and Johnny. And then the boy that she is in love with is Gat, and he's kind of a family friend of sorts. Cadence says that they're not called the liars until the first summer that Gat came to stay with them when they were all 8 years old. Now, Gat is Johnny's stepdad's nephew. I think that this is such an interesting choice. I think that E. Lockhart was trying really hard to strike a balance between having someone related to the family who was close enough that it would make sense for them to be invited to spend the entire summer on this island with them and invited into this inner circle, but not too close that this was a story about cousin fucking. And I don't think she struck that balance. I honestly think this book would have been better if they were cousins. I know that's crazy. I mean, I think it would have been better if it was Johnny's stepbrother. Even that's fine. It's like she wanted to have just enough distance so that there could not be any accusations of that, and it kind of made it incoherent. Because what do you mean his stepdad's nephew is coming to stay? It tries to explain it, but it doesn't do a good job. In introducing these cousins, we get some more descriptive words that I absolutely hate. I hate them because it feels like they're trying to do something and they just fall flat every time. And it also feels in a really like secondhand embarrassing way that the author really liked these descriptions because she uses them repeatedly. Johnny is described as bounce, effort, and snark. Mirren is sugar, curiosity, and rain. And Gat is contemplation, enthusiasm, ambition, and strong coffee. Now, Gat is Indian. He is the only non-white person on this island, so to call him strong coffee is an incredibly interesting choice from E. Lockhart. When he's first described, I will say that it says he's wired with energy. That is another thing that is not shown to be true in this book. So the strong coffee description, I do think in a lot of ways was about the color of his skin, and I think that is beyond icky. What the hell? There is a hint of awareness that there are some racial dynamics with Gat staying with this very white family. When he first shows up, her grandmother seems surprised, and her mouth forms a straight line before she puts on a fake smile. It shows us that it knows that there's something there, but I don't think it ever really explores it. It has not said anything about it at the point I'm at, 80 pages in. I still have like 140 pages left to go, so maybe it will say something. I doubt it will say anything interesting. Gat is meant to feel a little bit like an outsider, to be someone who kind of goes up against the expectations and the customs of this family, not really in a rebellious way, just in the way that an outsider might. But it doesn't really have anything to do with his race, which I think the book knows should have been important, but doesn't know how to get into. It jumps immediately from the summer when they're 8, when Cadence and Gat first meet, to the summer when they're 14, where this crushing between them is really starting to develop. They go out together in the motorboat, and they go for a swim, and they have forgotten towels, so they have to cuddle up close to each other like cringe little 14-year-olds. And here, Gat says, "This is only so we don't get hypothermia. Don't think I find you pretty or anything." And then pretty quickly says, "I do find you pretty, Katie. I didn't mean that the way it came out. In fact, when did you get so pretty?" Reading it out loud, it actually doesn't sound as awkward as it feels when you read it on the page, but I just don't think that this book does a good job of encapsulating the way that 14-year-olds speak. There are better examples of this. I mean, in fact, when did you get so pretty? No 14-year-old is saying that. I'm sorry, he just doesn't feel like a realistic character in any way. And when I say this isn't how 14-year-olds talk, I say that from experience, because I was 14 at the time this book is set. That is not how anyone around me spoke. They sound so weirdly, like, formally British that I actually looked up to see if E. Lockhart is British, writing a story set in America, Not at all. Totally wrong on that. I don't know why they sound like this. Like at one point, Cadence's mom says about her granddad, you know he needs looking after. That's a British way of phrasing that. Am I crazy? Cadence and Gat spend this summer when they're 14 getting closer and closer to each other, spending so much time together, holding hands and stuff, but never kissing. Then we get to the summer where they're 15, which is the one right immediately after Cadence's dad has left. She has spent the school year thinking about how much she loves Gat, and when she gets to the island, he's not there to greet her. So she goes down to the house that he stays in with Johnny and Johnny's family. She sees him through the window, and he's taking down a flower that he's dried, and she thinks, oh my god, he loves me so much. He's dried this flower for me. I've been waiting for him all year. I'm so excited to spend the summer with my Gat, the boy that I love. And then she watches as he puts this flower into an envelope and writes an address on it, and she realizes there's another girl. And in true 15-year-old fashion, she is like, this is genuinely the worst thing that has ever happened to me. There is nothing I could conceive of that could possibly be more devastating than this. I do think it's easy in this book to be judgmental about the ways that these children act. They are dramatic. They're ridiculous. That is true to life in a lot of ways, though. So I'm trying not to pick on that too much, because absolutely at 15 years old, I would have thought that I was going to die if this happened to me. Cadence learns from Johnny that Gat has a girlfriend back in New York named Raquel. Gat never speaks about her to Cadence directly, but there is a very clear and defined distance between them. All of the cousins go down to the beach for a picnic, and Gat starts getting into this really shallow commentary on wealth and land ownership, and he says, guys, not everyone has private islands. Everyone, of course, tells him to shut up, but I hate this. This is really stupid to me. I want Gat to say something scathing. I want him to say something, because, again, Lockhart is treating 14-year-olds, whether it's her audience or her characters, I guess they're 15 at the time, even worse. She is treating them as though they don't know anything. And while, yes, these are entitled, spoiled rich kids, they are aware of the very basics of the reality of class. They're fucking 15. I also think that 15-year-olds have way stronger opinions than this. Like, not everybody owns private islands. You are 15 years old. They know this. Being told to shut up really angers Gat, and he, again, dramatically walks into the sea in his jeans, and Cadence follows him. Here he says, I politicize everything. No, that was the most lukewarm take of all time. I don't even know if you could actually call what he said a take. But Cadence gives him the attention that he's looking for, and then kind of nonsensically says that when they tell him to shut up, what they actually mean is that they love him. And then all is right between the two of them. In the middle of the night that night, he calls her name outside of her house, and they lie down on the walkway together, and he asks to hold her hand, and he says, the universe is seeming really huge right now. I need something to hold on to, which for some reason I just think is fucking nasty. I underlined this when I read it the first time, which meant that I thought it was like emotionally impactful. Reading it today, I hate that. I just think that is just such corny writing. I'm having such a hard time articulating why this writing is so cliche and corny, but the universe is seeming really huge right now. I would punch this kid in the fucking face. If you want to hold my hand, just hold my hand. Don't get into all of it. Oh my god. It's making it seem like they understand each other without actually putting in any effort to make that true. The next morning, she takes him up to the attic of her house on this island, where her mom has told her to go through her dad's things and pick out what she might want so that they can get rid of the rest of it. And up here is where the two of them kiss for the first time, and it's magical and it's terrifying. And I will say a positive thing about this book, though the characters are so flat and they feel so unrealistic, I think that they do fall in love in the way that 15-year-olds fall in love. I think that you can feel the confusion and the uncertainty of it, and it does seem true to life. And it is so very set in the summer, and this thing of like just only being together in the summer and falling in love each summer and then spending the school year apart. It feels very real to me, as unrealistic as the characters are. Though I cannot extend this generosity to the writing. Here, and really whenever she's trying to convey any sort of emotion, Lockhart starts to do this absolutely arbitrary line break thing, because she thinks of herself in some ways as a poet. They kiss, and it says, we were warm and shivering, and young and ancient and alive. And it's all broken up as if it's a poem, and I think that is horrible. And it's hard to read. It's so very disruptive. It does not give the text more depth or more emotional power in the way I think the author thinks that it does. Here, when they're kissing in the attic, they are interrupted by Cadence's grandfather. Nothing really happens with that other than like typical 15-year-old embarrassment. Next, Cadence talks a little bit about how her grandma died 8 months before this summer and how her family doesn't like to talk about the dead. This is establishing a precedent for things that happen later in the book. If you know, you know, but I'm not telling you yet. And Gat is the only person who doesn't follow along with the family's customs about hiding all of their feelings and not bringing up any dead people or dead dogs or people who are gone, like Cadence's dad. He very easily and very casually will mention people that no one else will talk about. And I don't think that this really works with Gat's character, because I think to do this, to put aside everyone's clear dismay, the awkward silences, the dirty looks that they give him when he does this, he has to either be actively rebelling against them or be ignoring their social cues. And I don't think Gat is really someone who does any of that. At least not as overtly as this makes it seem. I do understand that Gat is supposed to be different. I understand that he is supposed to kind of model for Cadence different ways of being outside of her very insular family. He's also supposed to be different enough so that this isn't an incest story, but this just doesn't really make sense to me. Cadence then briefly describes how her and Gat spent the summer in love with each other, secretly touching under the table, hiding themselves away so that they can make out, sending doodles and notes, and then we get to the night of the aforementioned accident. Cadence doesn't remember what happened in the night leading up to this accident. She doesn't know where her cousins were. She doesn't know why she went to the beach alone. She doesn't know why she swam in just her underwear. She seems to have walked down to the beach in only her underwear, not bringing clothes or a towel. But what she does know is that she clearly swam too far out, hit her head, and then washed up on the shore where her mom found her like hypothermic and unable to speak. And they took her to the hospital where she was diagnosed with hypothermia, with respiratory issues, and with a head injury. She spent the rest of the summer back at her full-time house, and Gat never contacted her, totally abandoned her once she got hurt, and absolutely broke her heart. And then 6 weeks after the accident, her debilitating migraines start, and she spends the next year in a sort of recovery, but mostly just in a lot of pain and suffering, both physical and mental. That next summer, her dad, who had moved to Colorado and abandoned the family, says, "Actually, you're not going to the island this summer. I want to take you to Europe." She begrudgingly goes to Europe with him and spends the entire time homesick and physically sick. She's vomiting, she's in pain, she's also sending desperate emails to Mirren and Johnny, wishing that she was back on the island. No matter how upset she is at Gat, this is where she's always spent her summers, and she wants to be with her cousins. While they don't email her back, this isn't shocking to her because there is not internet access on the island, and typically the cousins don't really keep in touch over the school year. They just have these really intense summers together, and then it kind of fizzles out, and then they see each other again the next year. She spends the school year after her trip to Europe really sick, in and out of hospital, in and out of specialists, not really able to make it to school, failing all of her classes, and to take some control back into her life, she begins to give things away. It's kind of a rebellion against the wealth and consumerism of her family, but it's also meant to show us that she is kind of losing it because she gives things away, like the pillows on her bed or a framed photo of her grandmother. Her mom has a conversation with her where she, of course, expresses displeasure with this, and she says that things have value, they have power, that they can be beautiful, they can hold personal histories, and then Cadence, irritatingly, over-explains that actually what her mom wants out of physical objects and displays of wealth is status. And she says, money is power, as this mic drop moment. You know what I'm going to say. This is another moment where E. Lockhart is treating her audience like they are idiots. Come on. Money is power, as if that is the first time that your readers have ever thought of that? Get a grip. Through this time, Cadence keeps repeating how she doesn't remember what happened before her accident, how this is a symptom of the head injury, but is really, really troubling her. She'll go through a list of things that we already know that she's already told us about the summer when she was 15, and it will also have a couple of other things that we don't have the full stories of because she doesn't remember, like her mom saying the black pearls, her granddad leaning up against a tree lit by a bonfire, and a few other like muddled images. When Cadence asks her mom what happened, it really upsets her. And she says, "You ask me this every day since the accident and you never remember." She starts drinking and she says, "I don't think we should talk about it. The doctors think it's better if you just remember on your own." This is giving us another thing that we want to know. And it is effectively keeping you reading through the garbage of it all. I can't say it's not doing that. The next summer, when she's 17, her dad wants to take her on another trip, this time to Australia, but she doesn't want to go, and they compromise with 4 weeks on the island and 4 weeks with her dad. Annoyingly, here, Cadence talks about the overwhelming expectations of her family and about being the eldest granddaughter and like the heiress, and she says that this is why she's dyed her blonde hair black. I just want E. Lockhart to know that your audience knows this. The night before she's set to go to the island, one of the younger cousins calls, and he asks her outright if she is a drug addict. It's clear that there are some rumors going around in her family, and then he says that he's scared because the houses are haunted. And she says, "Don't be afraid, just ask your older sister Mirren to tell you a bedtime story." Then we get to part 3, which begins with their arrival on the island. When they get here, they are greeted by the younger cousins and the aunts, but not her friends, the older cousins. She can see them waving from a cliff, but they're not at the dock. Everyone's treating her like she is a very sickly, sensitive child, and it's difficult for her to wrap her head around the different way that she's being treated and also how she does need to be treated differently because she's sick. And a lot has changed also with this island. She's shocked to see that her grandparents' house has been totally rebuilt. This is something that was mentioned to have been happening the previous summer, but she didn't know that it was going to be so different. It's this very cold, modern steel house, and some of the trees that she loved had been torn down, like this maple tree that had a swing attached to it. She's absolutely devastated by this, but she has to pull herself together because of the expectations of appearance that her mom has. Her granddad is also kind of losing it in his old age. He calls her Mirren quite a few times. Mirren's younger siblings and her mom are staying with the granddad, which leaves the house that they typically stay in to the older cousins. And the older cousins, when she goes to meet with them, they also say, "We're doing things differently this year. We don't want to do nightly family dinners at Grandpa's new house. We're just going to hang out all together here." Cadence is mad at Gat for abandoning her. They do quickly start holding hands again, but it will take a little bit more than that for her to fully trust him. She also at this time is trying a lot harder to piece together what happened the summer when she was 15 before the accident. She talks to Mirren and Johnny a little bit about how she's been getting rid of stuff because she's getting rid of a whole bunch of things in the summer home as well. She had sent some things to each of them. Mirren says that she never received the Barbie that she sent. Johnny kind of blows off her question about the scarf that she sent to him. This doesn't really make sense to me because she talks about how she's giving away things to people who need it. It's in some ways supposed to be like a positive thing that she's doing. Again, also that she's kind of losing it. It doesn't make sense that she tells them, "I'm giving things to people who can use them." And then she sends things to her equally wealthy cousins. I don't know. It feels like there's no reason for that other than to justify them having this conversation. And so she can be hurt at being ignored, and also to kind of set up some other things that I know are going to happen in this book. I think the donating things that Cadence does is just another quirk she has that hides a lack of characterization. I think it's a facade of having some sort of arc for your character, some sort of personality. I don't think it's hiding it very well. That just about brings us to where I've left off here. This cover is disgusting, by the way. I don't know what I was doing when I read this the first time, but it is like absolutely covered in dirt. Where I've left off, Gat is trying to win Cadence back by saying, "Let's just start all over again." And she is kind of fighting against this because she has been so hurt by him, but she also knows that she can't really resist it. I am going to update you at one point, maybe once I'm finished, but maybe hopefully once more, and we will talk about how amazing this book is soon. Okay, bye. Hello there, I'm back 70 more pages into this book. For an update, I have about 70 pages left. I have gotten to the beginning of part 4, where I last left you off. Gat and Cadence were talking about how they were going to start over. In this conversation, Gat says the phrase, "I'll say amusing remarks." You cannot convince me that this is not a small British man in the body of an American Indian boy. That night, Cadence has dinner with the rest of the family while the cousins stay in the other house, and she starts talking to her younger cousins about the summer where she was in Europe. She says, "What'd you do last summer? How were the other cousins last summer?" And the cousins say to her, "Your mom told us not to talk to you about your accident." And she says, "I don't want to talk about my accident. I'm talking about the summer after that." But they're little kids and they want to play Angry Birds. It does very much literally say that. Mirren tells her that her mom has told literally everyone on the island not to talk to her about her accident, that the doctors say it's best for her to come up with her memories on her own. So no matter how much she asks anyone, no one will say anything. This is, of course, just incredibly convenient and doesn't really make any sense, especially because her grandpa absolutely has dementia. How is he remembering not to talk about it? Whatever. We can let her get away with doing things that make no sense because she's trying to tell a story. At least she is trying to tell a story. Recently, I have read some books that had no plot, and that is part of the reason why I wanted to read this so badly, because I knew, like, it's like eating a bag of chips. Like, you feel sick to your stomach, but you just keep having one more. Very readable book because of the secrets, even though I know them, and because it's trying to have plot. Her cousins ask her about how her trip to Europe went, and she starts in on her kind of "woe is me, I'm sick" jokes. And they don't really have empathy for her, and I also struggle to have empathy for her. My lack of empathy comes very much from her refusal of the label of disability, and then her very derogatory language that I don't think she should be using if she refuses that label. And her cousins hate that she says, "Don't pity me. Don't treat me differently," and then is constantly telling these woe is me, sad, pathetic stories. I do like that they push up against her, and this is not the last time that it happens. I will applaud the book for doing that. Candace is getting back some of her memories at this point. I think the very first one that she gets back is a memory of the summer when she was 15, which, by the way, they call them Summer 15, Summer 8, and I hate that. There's not really an issue with it, but I'm just not going to repeat that. She has this memory of her mom and her mom's sisters and her granddad, and they are having an argument about her grandparents' house, which is the nicest house on the island. All of the daughters want it. There is clearly a lot of feelings about this, about favorites and about who deserves it and who's going to get it. And her grandpa is pitting all of his daughters against each other, and he's also holding his power to sell it over their heads. Then we cut to all of the older cousins having a conversation about mottos. And Gat says that his motto is, "Do not accept an evil you can change." And then Mirren absolutely nonsensically disagrees with this. And she disagrees with this by saying, "There's very little you can change. You need to accept the world as it is." That makes absolutely no sense, because Gat's motto is very carefully and deliberately worded in a way that Mirren's rebuttal is not a rebuttal at all. It doesn't address what Gat said whatsoever. These two things are not mutually they exist at the same time. Mirren has said nothing that even remotely engages with what Gat has said. It's just a random disagreement that makes no sense. I don't understand why it was included. I think it's just trying to show us these characters a little bit more, but there's not much to them. So Mirren disagrees, and there's not really anything more to it than that. After this conversation, Gat and Cadence go upstairs together, and they kiss, but then Gat pulls away and he says, "I shouldn't do this." And he kind of confronts Cadence a little bit, saying that she doesn't really know him and that she doesn't understand the wholeness of his being and how he's someone else outside of this island, and on this island he's an outsider from everyone here. He does actually mention race again, which I'm happy about, even though it again didn't really get into it. And he says that her grandfather sees him as Heathcliff, and this reference to Wuthering Heights was absolutely shocking to me because I was under the assumption that E. Lockhart has never read another book in her life. This is a fight. Cadence is too ignorant to understand Gat's position or his point of view, and he leaves her there in the hallway. The next day, her granddad takes her into town, and here they're just buying fudge, and he's bragging to the cashier about his granddaughter. And one of the things he says is that she has a good head on her shoulders, and she, in her mind, is furious about this. She says, "My head is fucking broken. in countless medically diagnosed ways. Okay, no, because it's really just one way. It really is just the one way, and that has been very clear in the book that it's just the one way. And I think that this countless medically diagnosed ways was only phrased like that because the sentence was kind of empty without countless. My head is broken in medically diagnosed ways doesn't really have the same oomph to it. It doesn't have the same ring. So even though it makes absolutely no sense and is demonstrably false, E. Lockhart was like, I gotta put the word countless in there. She has one diagnosis relating to her head. She gets another memory of her and her grandfather having an argument about little ivory statues that he has. I think this is pretty funny and pretty classic, privileged point of view of her being able to empathize with things only when they affect her. She can have this empathy for animals that are hunted for ivory, but not for the human beings around her, and that is because of the way that it directly or indirectly impacts her. She doesn't see Gat's issues or the treatment of the staff on the island because they are, in their own ways, providing her with a service. Maybe you can't call what is happening with Gat a service, but it's something. Animals, her conceptualization of them is like an elephant and a rhino, is as like a cute thing that she kind of abstractly thinks of, and where it gives her the most value is it as a whole being, so that she can think of it as a cute little thing. I think that this scene is trying to show us that she's capable of fighting back against her family and their traditions and what they believe. It's very shallow, though, and that does really make sense with her character. I'm not necessarily knocking E. Lockhart for this. I'm not taking points off. I just thought it was a kind of funny and telling scene. The following week or so isn't as bright and fun as the beginning is. Mirren is always sick and she's just getting sicker. Her cousins never want to go anywhere or do anything, and often she'll get migraines that take her out for many days at a time. At one point, it's talking about how Gat is reading out loud to them, and she says she's only half paying attention because he hasn't kissed her. I think at this point in the book, it's getting exhausting. It is so tiring how petty and bitter she is, how all of her self-worth is based in this boy, her lack of reflection. I just don't care about Cadence and Gat anymore. I said at the beginning, this is pretty true. The drama of it is pretty true to how 15-year-olds... Now, she's almost 18, which, you know, is still pretty fucking young. But I am tired of the way that she thinks about relationships and how single-minded she is in this pursuit of Gat. Johnny tells Cadence that Gat abandoned her because he was really conflicted about seeing two girls at once, and he knew that it was a kind of unforgivable betrayal to his girlfriend back home that he fell so hard for her. Then she has a conversation with Mirren where Mirren says, "You gotta leave him alone. Like, this is only going to end badly. You're going to break his heart." And she says, what? If anything, he's going to break my heart. She has no idea of herself as being capable of causing harm, even though Gat has tried to tell her that she is. Despite her massive amount of privilege, she can only see herself in the role of victim. And it's like, I'm exhausted. Like, communicate with him, or learn who you are without him, or reflect on something. I'm done with this. The next time her and Gat are alone together, she makes one of these cringe, dark humor, woe is me jokes where she says, "My boyfriend is Percocet," and Gat pushes back. Again, I appreciate this. He says, you want people to feel sorry for you. You say, don't pity me, don't treat me differently, but what you want is for us to pity you and for us to treat you differently and for us to think that you are the most oppressed person in the world. He doesn't say that, but that is what she wants. He says, you're so immensely privileged that it's really difficult for me to feel sorry for you. Your granddad sent you to Europe. She's like, oh my God, granddad sent me to Europe? I didn't even consider how my dad could have afforded that. Of course he did. And she's wondering, why did these adults, what are they doing behind my back? But then she goes on a really irritating little monologue where she talks about how hard it is to be in pain all the time. Okay, to be clear, of course, yes, that is hard. And I don't doubt the accuracy of that statement. I think Lockhart has done a pretty good job of making it clear how debilitating and how much this pain affects her. At the same time, this is her very first experience of adversity in life. She has been only privileged through everything. Like, sure, her parents are divorced. Sure, the boy she loves doesn't always love her back, doesn't give her the exact attention that she desperately craves. But this is really the first time she's ever experienced adversity. And she's like, I am worse off than literally anybody else in the whole universe. And I need you all to recognize that. It's insufferable. She ends up getting called for lunch with the rest of the family, and then she gets a migraine that knocks her out for a few days. And when she sees the cousins the next time, she realizes that they're lying to her about what they've been doing. She can't fathom why that is. And I don't really remember this book. Of course I remember the twist. It's unforgettable in the worst way. But I also can't really fathom why they're lying to her, knowing the truth of it all. But maybe that will come up. Another thing that's happening at this point a lot is that Cadence keeps describing the house that they're staying in as getting increasingly disgusting and dirty because it's just a bunch of teenagers living in there and they don't care about keeping up the cleanliness and appearances that their parents care so much about. This doesn't make sense to me because it has been made incredibly clear throughout this book that there are staff on this island. Even in the stupid map it gives you at the beginning, there's a staff quarters. I don't get why we've gone back on that. Surely these rich people who aren't making their own food also are not cleaning their own houses. Later on, her and the liars, which she keeps calling them, and I keep fucking hating, they take some canoes out to this rocky beach, and there's a cliff behind them, and it's clear that the boys have been here before and done this. They climb up the cliff, and they start cliff diving. And she's like, I want to do it too. And everyone's like, no, you're too fragile. You're going to get hurt. And she has this like strong, empowered woman moment where she's like, I can do this. And she proves it mostly to herself that she can dive off of this cliff that looks so terrifying to her. Here we get some of this absolutely brutal, ridiculous, clipped, cut up poetic language that she's trying to use. She's adding in these stupid line breaks to make it seem like there is an emotional emphasis that she cannot provide through her actual writing. It is exhausting. It happens more in the beginning of the book. I'm glad that I'm not seeing it as much, but it happens a lot. Part 3 ends with them returning to the island, and Cadence sees that the tire swing that had been torn down is hung up in a new tree, and tucked inside is a note to her from Gat, and it's filled with dried flowers. That is where I'm at. I have 2 more parts to go, 70 more pages. I am unsure if I'm going to read it this night because I'm feeling exhausted by this book. The writing style is very difficult, and also I fucking hate this character. So I will update you maybe tomorrow morning. Hello, I have returned to talk to you about the last 2 parts of We Were Liars by E. Lockhart. Before I get started, I wanted to just so quickly say, if you're interested in joining the book club, you should check it out. We're reading The Seas by Samantha Hunt by the time this video comes out this month in May. We read a book every month. It's awesome. It's great. I think I'm going to talk about it a little bit more if I remember at the end of the video when I'm done talking about the book, because I've never actually like explained the tiers anywhere. I've just kind of left it up to everyone else to figure out. So if you are interested, stick around for that. But let's get into this because it is awesome. And I know you have been waiting for me to talk about the end of this book. So we get to part 3. Which is where Cadence remembers the fire that burnt down her grandparents' house. That's why it has been rebuilt. She remembers that her and her cousins set this fire on purpose. To be clear, this is just part of the reveal. It's one of like 3 or 4 reveals. It needs to keep doing these reveals to keep you interested in reading the book because it has nothing else going for it. It's not the big one yet, though. When she remembers this thing about the fire, she goes to Johnny, and Johnny tells her a little bit more context about why they decided to set this fire, which triggers a whole bunch of memories to come back to her. Ever since their grandmother had died, their moms had been fighting tooth and nail about the inheritances, and their grandfather, this patriarch with all of the power and control, was egging them on. He was speaking about them behind their backs, and he was telling people conflicting things about what he was going to give them. A lot of this fighting was surrounding the house that Cadence and her mom live in on the island, which is a lot bigger than the house that Mirren and her family live in. Mirren's family has 4 children, and it's literally just Cadence and her mom in a house with 5 bedrooms. So, of course, the woman who picked out the tiles and the paint and who has always lived in this house, Cadence's mom, wants to stay in it. And of course, the woman who lives in the smallest house and has the most children also wants to stay in it. And then there was also a lot of like the typical inheritance things that you hear about with rich families, like they wanted specific pieces of jewelry and were fighting over stuff like that. And in their fighting, they were also getting their children involved, knowing that the grandfather would look more kindly on his grandchildren. They were trying to pit them against each other, and it didn't work. They refused to engage. Cadence's mom would ask her to send her grandfather letters when they weren't staying at the island over the summer to tell him about how much she loved living in their island home and cement her place as the eldest grandchild, the heir. Cadence's mom felt a lot of anxiety about Johnny being a boy and being only 3 weeks younger than Cadence. There is not really an exploration of gender inequity within this family, which I think is hugely missing. And I think E. Lockhart's audience is mostly young women who would absolutely notice this inequality and want her to address it. It seems like there's going to be something about the tradition of misogyny in this family, the very typical American ideas about, you know, who's getting all the money, firstborn boys and shit like that. It talks in the start when we're introduced to the grandparents. It says that the grandmother was displayed by the grandfather, and it says she seemed to like it. I don't think that we're supposed to understand her as someone who did like it. I think we're supposed to see the misogyny there, but it never gets into it. And I think gender has a huge impact on the stakes of these inheritance fights, because these women, none of them are financially independent outside of men. No commentary whatsoever that we ever get to see on that, though. And I know E. Lockhart was aware of it when she was writing it, and I know that her audience probably would have enjoyed seeing some kind of exploration. With Cadence's memories of how the aunts and her mom were trying to rope their children into these fights, we get the most egregious use of these line breaks in the entire book. I'll read it to you, but I can't really portray how absolutely irritating it is on the page, so I'll also put a photo up. It was easier to tell her I would, and later I told her I had, but Bess had asked Mirren to do the same thing, and neither one of us begged Granddad for the fucking tablecloths. The problem with this is that at the very least, throughout the book, these line breaks have tried to convey some sort of emotion that the writer can't imbue into the text on her own. This isn't really conveying anything. These are so meaningless. I mean, it's always been kind of meaningless, but this is to a degree that we haven't seen before. And it is getting fucking taxing to read this disrupted writing style. This stylization that adds nothing. Next, Cadence remembers a scene where her grandfather asks the grandchildren what they think Harvard should name the building that they're going to name after him after he donates a large sum to them. And she realizes in this moment that neither her mother nor her aunts have any financial independence outside of men. This is a little bit funny, just a little side tangent here. It goes into each of the kind of failed businesses that they all tried to do and how they're all living off of their trust funds. And for some reason, her mom was like a purebred dog breeder, which is so random, like randomly despicable and absolutely hilarious to me. Like, why is she fucking dog breeder? Anyway, in this moment, Cadence realizes that her granddad is not trying to get them involved in his financial decisions. He's making a threat. He is threatening to spend the inheritance that these women need. This is over-explained to us. Cadence says it outright. We have all the information. She has told us that this is what her grandfather does throughout the book, and yet still she has to end this little scene, this memory, by saying, he was making a threat. We know! We are not stupid. Like, I am an adult, but your intended audience is also not stupid. Cadence then remembers refusing to back her mom up in a conversation with Mirren's mom and her grandfather. Her mom wants her to say, we love the house that we stay in on the island, and we want you to let us stay here, because he's kind of threatening to give it to the bigger family. But she doesn't. She doesn't do what she knows her mom wants her to do. Instead, she says the truth, which is, it is too big for them. This kicks off a huge fight between her and her mom, because of course it does. And in this fight, Cadence says, you know Granddad's only doing this because he's sad about Gran's death. This is absolutely ridiculous to me. I need to believe that this is not meant to be taken at face value, because That's insane. I mean, of course, the reason that he's doing this is because of her death, but it's not because of his grief. It's because he now has all of the power and control, and he has no one to hold him accountable to how he is expressing and using that power. Here's the thing. I think E. Lockhart does know that that is why he is acting like this somewhere in her subconscious. I think she just didn't have the language to articulate it, so instead phrased it as he's sad about his wife's death. I would like to believe that we are not supposed to understand this as truth. However, Cadence is positioned as the person in this argument who is level-headed, and so I do think that we are supposed to take this as it is. And it's absurd. After this fight with her mom, Cadence remembers going to the tennis courts with Gat that night. And here we finally get something that I have said I didn't really expect the book to do, which is a little bit more of an interrogation of how Gat's racialized identity affects him on this island full of incredibly wealthy white people. He, in this moment, he opens up to Cadence and he talks to her about how her grandfather is really racist towards him, how it's kind of covert, but it is also very clear. He tells her, he doesn't call me by my name. He only calls me young man. He won't make eye contact with me. And he told Johnny's mom that if she married my uncle, he would write her out of the will. You're reading this being told explicitly to Cadence after having noticed it yourself throughout the book, and you're glad that she is finally being forced to confront this thing that she's been totally blind to. But at the end of his little monologue, she is essentially doing the equivalent of looking at his boobs. He finishes talking, and she says, Gat sighed. I loved the curve of his jaw. Did you listen to a word he said? And then she leans in and she kisses him, and she says, it's so magical that we showed our weaknesses to one another. Your weaknesses? His weakness being his race and your family, your grandfather's racism perpetrated against him. That's his weakness. What are you talking about? I want to be clear, this is not a condemnation of E. Lockhart. I am just so frustrated with this character at this point. I hate this woman. Cadence is the worst ever, and this scene is so frustrating to read. But it gets worse. The next part is the most patently insane thing that happens in this book. I cannot believe that this made it past literally anyone. It's unbelievable. It is shockingly bigoted. So throughout the book, there have been these little retellings of classic fairy tales. I have not cared to recall them to you because they are stupid. They're basically just very clear, direct lines drawn from what's happening in Cadence's life and her family's life, and then told in like almost not even an allegorical way. Like it's literally just exactly what's happening, but they're called princesses and kings and stuff. It's really stupid, and it's also irritating that the lesson is so clear. It doesn't hide it behind anything, but still at the end of these fairy tales, it will drop the fairy tale narrator voice to explicitly tell you what the lesson is. I've hated them, and they've added nothing. They've kind of just been breaking up the book, I think, when Lockhart doesn't really know where to go next. This one we need to talk about, because this comes, again, immediately after this scene of Gat opening up about what has happened to him and his experiences of racism. And it is a retelling of Beauty and the Beast. And yes, the Beast's monstrosity is Gat's race, which is like, okay, maybe she could do something okay with it. Listen to this. I like, it's absurd. Her father sees the jaws and the snout. He hears the hideous growl whenever Beauty brings her new husband home for a visit. It doesn't matter how civilized the husband is. The father sees a jungle animal. Hello? That is pure hatred, racism, and bigotry that just got past everybody who read this book before it was published. In what world did this story need the qualifier jungle added on to animal? In what world did civilized need to be used here? That is fucking insane. I don't even know how to move past this because it is such a shocking moment in this book. But if I don't go on to the next thing, I will sit here gawking, jaw dropped about this absurdly bigoted retelling for the rest of my life. So after that, the fighting within the family is just escalating like crazy. Granddad calls Johnny into his study and he asks him basically to break his mother and Ed up, and he refuses, and he's told your college fund will disappear, and he still won't budge. Then Johnny's mom asks Gat to no longer come to family meals because it's making the grandfather upset. Mirren is asked to pressure him into letting them stay in Cadence's family's home. She doesn't do it. And Cadence is asked by her mother to make sure to emphasize to her grandfather that nothing is going on between her and Gat, because he did catch them kissing in the attic. She gets into a huge fight with her mom because of this, of course, and then she runs into Gat's arms for comfort. Now, this is just kind of like a little nitpick that maybe isn't all that fair, but I know some of you will be on my side with this one. There has been this really cliche, corny metaphor that, I mean, it's fine. It's a YA novel. When Cadence is upset, she speaks of it as bleeding and as of Gat tending her wounds. It's not a crime. It's just kind of silly and like not very creative. In this moment, though, it says, I ran out of the house and into Gat's arms. I bled on him and he didn't mind. Does that not sound menstrual to you? I'm sorry, that does sound like a period. But anyway, the cousins all talk about how everything in their lives would be solved if the house that their grandparents lived in was struck by lightning. This, of course, isn't true. It runs way deeper than that, but they're 15 years old and they want a magical act of God to cure everything. Gat and Cadence realize that Gat will never be invited back to the island, that either Johnny's mom and Gat's uncle will break up, or they won't, and she will be disinherited. Either way, Gat's not coming back. After this, it goes back to where we were in the present before all these memories came back to her, and that was talking to Johnny. Now, there have been a lot of pages of memories, but I think it has been pretty clear where we are and what's happening throughout the book. We go back to her talking to Johnny, and it says, "What happened then?" I ask Johnny. Very clear. We've gone back to the present. This is the start of a new chapter. But then it says, we are still lying on the floor, early in the morning, summer 17. So basically in 3 sentences, it has told me 3 different times where we are. Stop treating me like I'm stupid. I don't know how many times I can say it. It's frustrating. Like, I just want you to trust that I know what's happening. Even if it had just said, what happened then, I asked Johnny. We are still lying on the floor early in the morning. That's fine. You don't need to tell me that it's back in summer of when you're 17. Summer 17 also, don't even get me started on that. The little quirks, horrible in this book. Johnny tells her about how there was a huge fight and everybody left the island. And they kind of did a little bit of behind the scenes manipulation to make sure that it was just the older cousins on the island so that they could carry out their plan. And as you would expect, the conversation that it shows us that led to the conclusion of let's burn down the house is told in a very stupid way. It is incredibly stylized, overusing all of the stylistic techniques that have been a bother throughout this entire book. It's doing the insanity of the line breaks and they're adding nothing. It's doing this repetition that is adding nothing. It's trying to tell us this is important, this is significant, this has emotion without using very many words, and it's doing that through a faux poetry format, and I hate it. In this conversation, Cadence says, what if we could stop being different colors, different backgrounds, and just be in love? Okay, first of all, I've never heard anything more ignorant in my fucking life. That's absurd. I would like to believe that we're not supposed to see this as okay, that we are supposed to understand that that is her pure and simple ignorance. She's been shown to be an ignorant character throughout the book. However, I think that we are supposed to see this conversation as these children having the right intentions, but coming to the wrong conclusion. I think that their dreams of a better life and of a life where money doesn't hold this power over their family and they all love each other and everything is daisies and roses. I think we're supposed to empathize with that. We're not supposed to think that they're making the right decision by burning down the house. They're stupid children. I don't know if E. Lockhart at the time understood that this dream of racelessness is so fucking ridiculous. Like Emily. Girl. No, not okay. So their plan is that each of them take a floor. Gat on the basement, Cadence on the ground floor, Johnny above her, and Mirren at the top. They're each going to douse their floor in gasoline, light it on fire, and then run, and then pretend that they didn't notice the fire, and they're counting on the fact that fire departments are not going to get there very quickly because they live on a private island. So in the present, Cadence has regained a lot of memories. She has access to so many things that she didn't know before, but she still doesn't know what happened between the fire and her mom finding her on the beach. She doesn't know anything about her own accident. So she goes back to the room that she's staying in, and she starts frantically writing everything down, trying to piece it together. And when she does this, she comes up with a memory of 2 of the dogs that lived on the island. When she came this summer, she was told that they died. It's been 2 years since she's been here. They could have died at any time. But she realizes that they accidentally killed the dogs in this fire. She's devastated because she, after remembering the fire and what they did, has been thinking of herself as this like rebel hero. And she had all of this bravado that she talks about. And she says, I thought we had taken down the patriarchy. I don't know. I'm mostly just annoyed with Cadence here. I don't think that we're supposed to see her view of this as correct. Patriarchy is a system, girl. What do you mean burning down the house? As if that even does anything to make a dent in your grandfather's control. Ridiculous and annoying, but I do think it's meant to be. In remembering the death of these dogs, she runs to Gat for comfort, and she tries to kiss him like she always does. And he pulls away and he says, I can't. I never should have. But he does tell her there's more to this tragedy that you're not remembering. Then she remembers her heavily sedated stay in hospital after her accident, and she remembers looking down at her hands and seeing that they were bandaged because they were burned. I'm calling bullshit on this. Even though it tries to say her burns healed really fast, burns are very serious, and I don't think that you would be able to just heal from a burn without knowing that you were burned afterwards. I don't think that's something that's like super easy to forget. I think it's bullshit. I do get that she has selective amnesia or whatever, but I just don't buy that she would be totally unaffected by these burns. But anyway, do you know what I'm gonna say next? Because we have got to the plot twist. It is a plot twist of all time. Johnny and Mirren and Gat all died in the fire. She has been hallucinating them, or maybe they've been ghosts the entire time she has been here, the summer of her 17th year. That's it. Okay, I know you think that's ridiculous. The problem is it gets worse, and this is really the issue with the plot twist in this book, is that the story behind it is so frustrating that it totally alienates you from this character because you're just so annoyed that she could be so unfathomably stupid. What happened was they each took a floor, they doused it in gasoline, and Cadence lit her floor, the ground floor, the one with the exits, before anyone had left the house. I do get that they're supposed to be a little bit tipsy. They've stolen some wine. I get that emotions are running high. That is beyond stupidity. That's crazy. That's crazy town. I know, again, guilt is supposed to be part of this. But then she goes to see her little ghost cousins who are still there. And Johnny says, it wasn't your fault. Don't take the blame for this. Absolutely, it was your fault. Are you joking? I object. 100% this is your fault. You made the stupidest mistake of all time and you killed 3 people because of it. That's the worst ending to a book I have ever read in my life. It's not the very end of the book. She goes to her little ghost hallucination cousins and they say goodbye. They say it's really hard to stay here. That's why Mirren's been so sick. They walk into the sea and they're gone forever. There's a little ode to each of the cousins where she reuses those ridiculous adjectives that she had before. I don't care about the cousins because they weren't well-developed characters. It's trying to make me cry. It's trying to make me feel emotional. I don't give a fuck about any of these people. I will say in Gat's ode, she describes him as having a dramatic nose, which along with the rest of the book, feels questionable at best. The end of the book is very YA, because this is a YA book. It's a hopeful tone shift told through about 100,000 stupid line breaks. I don't hate the very last few sentences. It kind of references the beginning in a way that YA often does, and that I think I sometimes feel like I'm missing in adult fiction. Like, do you remember when the last sentence of a book was like such a punch? I feel like that doesn't happen as much with books anymore now that I'm an adult. So what I think about this twist is that if you're going to do a twist of this caliber of stupidity, there needs to be some cleverness in other spots. I don't think that E. Lockhart was expecting anyone to reread this or to read it knowing what the twist was. And the book suffers for it. She doesn't want you to be able to guess it. I don't think that it is necessarily unpredictable, but it's not satisfying in any way. It doesn't feel like pieces are coming together, really. I think that while it would have made it more obvious, there needed to be some pointed looks shared between the adults when she's there, when she's 17, like when her grandfather calls her Mirren. There's no indication that there's any emotion of these adults. It has been clearly established that they don't speak of dead people. That is, of course, for narrative reasons. And yet, I do think that the dead children would bring up something on the face of her mom or Mirren's mom. I also think, why establish that the family doesn't talk about dead people if you're going to have a scene where Johnny's mom asks her if she sees Johnny at night? But I digress. It just feels like the intention was more to shock and surprise you, and so it wanted to hide it so badly that there is no coherence when you get to it. I read that she was inspired by the twist in Gone Girl, which I honestly think is offensive, but she said that she liked how in Gone Girl, after the first reveal, the reader still has interest in the story because there's more reveals to come. All of the information is not given. I think that is a show of a very unskilled writer in We Were Liars. There is nothing else to keep me wanting to read this. There's no logic or meaning or message or character development. It's so flat in every other way. It is absolutely hinging on a twist that is stupid and ridiculous and cliche and overdone and has no other substance besides those twists. Another problem with this is the writing, which I've mentioned many times. I think the hardest books to read, the hardest books to look at because of the secondhand embarrassment, are books that have a clear lack of writing skill, and then at the sentence level, word choice level, very pretentious writing. You think too highly of yourself. Oh, you did not do what you think you were doing with this book, and I am humiliated for you. Another thing I don't think I've mentioned that I hated about this book is that after the first little bit, there's not really any depth or emotion to the love story. I think that it's crazy for a book with the intended audience that this book has, largely young women, like young teenage girls. It's crazy that the only things Gat really says to Cadence are that she's beautiful and that she's pretty, and he says it ad nauseum. It tries to tell us that they have some deeper connection or understanding of each other, but it doesn't do a good job of showing that. I'm also still hugely irritated that we never get an explanation for why they're called the Liars. It is just told, hey, we caused trouble, and that's why we were nicknamed the Liars. And they're constantly called the Liars. She goes, I'm going to go see the Liars throughout the book. And it's just a reminder that we don't get an explanation for that, and that it's just really just there so that she doesn't call them her cousins, because E. Lockhart had an idea for her book and she was afraid of making it kind of incest adjacent, because if she calls this group her cousins, she has to admit that Gat is kind of taking the role of a cousin in her life. To be clear, I don't think there's anything wrong with her relationship with Gat, like morally. I think it's just a boring, stupid relationship. But I think that it's clear that E. Lockhart was really afraid of the familial aspects to the love story. I did appreciate that she wrote a very flawed character. I think young adult novels often have characters that are just like pure heroes saving the day, and this did make it seem like she at least had a little bit of trust that her readers might understand the themes of the book. That was not shown anywhere else. But I appreciated having an unreliable and unlikable main character in this book. I also think that this had a strong sense of setting. That might be my own personal experience. To be 100% clear, my grandparents did not own a private island, but we did spend summers on an island that they lived on, and I understood the feeling of being somewhere that is like contained and that feels very safe and kind of free in the containment of being on an island. Like, we would just roam around, and I kind of was sent back to that time a little bit. No wealth or luxury, but the energy is kind of the same. And I do think this did a good job of that. It had a really strong setting. Like, the way she describes the food they're eating as well It's pretty good. It's fine. It's okay. When I was looking it up after I finished reading it, I saw that they are turning it into an Amazon original this summer. So look out for that. I'm sure it's going to be really good. At the end of the day, this book is all tell and no show. It is written in an incredibly pretentious, but also poorly done way. It hinges, absolutely relies on the most overused cliche plot twist of all time. And I think, honestly, worst of all, it thinks that its audience is stupid. And that is not a fun reading experience. It was a little bit fun to hate this the amount I hated it. And I want to thank you for coming along on this journey with me. And I want to thank everyone who liked this book for not arguing with me in the comments. I think before you start to argue, I would like you to think, how old was I when I read We Were Liars? And if you were under the age of 18, no, absolutely. This is a great book for teenagers. I mean, it's awful, but I understand why a teenager would like it. I think I liked it up until the plot twist. If you were 18 and up, I need you to think about that a little bit. Like, that is kind of crazy to me. But, you know, I'm not gonna yuck your yum. Like whatever you want. Don't fight with me about it, okay? If you've made it here, I promised I was going to talk a little bit about the book club because I've never done that before, and I feel like maybe I should. I mean, people always say go to Patreon, join my book club. Does anybody ever say how it works? Like, I wouldn't know how it works. Maybe I'm just stupid. Lots of people have figured it out up until this point. But there are basically 3 ways you can be part of the book club or the Patreon. So like a book club, every month we read a book and we talk about it. We talk about it in a pretty unstructured way on Discord. People just pop in with their thoughts at points in the book or whenever they finish the book. There's not really like strict timelines, which I think is a thing in some book clubs, but not ours. You can be part of the discussions for free. I'm not going to paywall discussions. That's absurd. If you go to the Patreon and you sign up for free and then find the Discord link from there. If you have the means and the desire for a little bit of financial support, there are 2 paid tiers on the Patreon. The first one is just the paid tier of the book club. This includes content that I make about the book that we talk about each month. So that's usually 2 videos, one being some discussion questions mid-month and like my own thoughts on it. Also, those questions will be posted in the Discord. This is just a video. And then the second being at the end of the month, I kind of like conglomerate everybody's thoughts and I talk through what we talked about in the discussion. There is also, that's $350 USD. The second one is $5, and that includes the book club plus bonus content, which right now there is a little bit more of. I am doing this over the summer. This is the only thing I'm really doing, which is wild. When I'm in school, there's less bonus content. So just know that if you join now, it's not going to be as frequent as it is right now. But up until September, I'll be posting much more, I think, bonus content. I'm doing a lot right now. I will get burnt out at one point. But at the very least, there will each month be 2 bonus content videos, which sounds like not very much, and it isn't very much, to be fair. But also that is me making 2 videos a week, because I make 1 YouTube video a week and then 2 bonus content, 2 book club videos a month. That is a lot when you're also doing full-time school, but I love it and I'm having so much fun. So like, know that I'm not complaining. If you are interested in that, the link will be in the bio. Thank you for supporting me in any way that you want to. Just you watching this video is like more support than I could have ever asked for. And I'm not going to talk about it. I love you. Thank you. I don't want to get corny. I'm going to start like crying or something if I do that. So I'm going to go. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.